Have you ever had a really significant moment in your life where you maybe encountered Jesus or the Holy Spirit in a way that just really gave you new vision, new sight for somebody? That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about Paul's conversion in Acts chapter 9. Welcome to Sermon Sessions. We're so glad you're with us. A lot to talk about today, right, everybody?
Yes, there is.
That sermon from Sunday, this text, a really interesting one, looking at Saul's conversion into Paul, changed the church forever. So what are our thoughts? Jumping in right away.
I think it's important to put it into context a little bit, okay? So let's remember that we're coming out of Philip, and Philip just went and met with the Ethiopian eunuch, and Philip was traveling. He wasn't an evangelist at first. He was a deacon who then became an evangelist. He was someone who had eyes for the outsider, and then he went to a people group who were considered outsiders, the Samaritans, and then from there, he's called by the Holy Spirit to go to a wilderness road to meet someone who is literally and figuratively and spiritually in the wilderness, to then bring that person in, right?
Yep.
And so then that's what's happening. And then now we find Paul, Saul, right? We now know him as Paul, but Saul, who is an insider, who thinks he's on the straight path. It happens to be pretty crooked. He's full of zeal. He's like thinking that he's doing all of God's work, and he's encountering on the road called straight, right? So you have a wilderness road for someone who's figuratively and literally, and then you have the road called straight. And it's like, well, here's a crooked guy who's thinking he's straight. He's thinking that he's on the right path, but man, he meets Jesus, and Jesus is like, why are you persecuting me? Like, that's wild. And I don't think that those two stories that are right, like we see them in two different chapters, but they're right next to each other on purpose.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And two roads that are named on purpose. And so you have this conversion of someone who thinks they're doing the will of God, who actually then is converted into like, whoa, my eyes are opened up to what God's really doing.
Yeah.
I didn't actually see that. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Reminds me of the verse in Isaiah, and I wish I could quote it perfectly, but it talks about how when the Lord, it's like a prophecy that the Lord will make the mountains collapse and he'll make valleys rise up, right? And we're seeing that. It's like those who are in exalted places end up on this prostration journey of like going low, and then people who are low, the Lord is bringing up. And so it's like this equalizing that's happening in the earthly church where God is going after everybody. He's like, and depending on where you are, he is like addressing you with that, like what you need to get into the community. If that makes sense, right?
Kind of that dismantling of hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, no, not my kingdom. We're doing it way different.
Exactly.
You know, like you said, I love that aspect of the whole book of Acts. We see that time and time again of like those that were really kind of important and had the power and the authority are brought low. And I think, the outsider, the oppressed, the marginalized are kind of brought up a little bit, but it's not to make anybody over anybody else. You know, it's to gather together on the same page to dismantle that.
And you mentioned that God meets people exactly as they need. Right. So if you think about it, like Philip, wouldn't it be amazing if like you heard the Spirit's voice audibly say, get up and go? Not saying that I would necessarily do it because I'm not always obedient to what God's voice is, but like that's a pretty powerful, like, oh, I should respond. For Saul to be able to get to where he is in this passage, think about what had to happen to meet him where he was. He had to not just encounter the Spirit, he had to encounter the resurrected Christ, and he got to visibly see him, whereas his the traveling companions got to hear him, which was wild for them. They're like, whoa, what's going on here? We don't see anyone talking, but we hear that person talking. But for Saul, imagine God knows Saul so well. He's like, if I just give him the voice of the Spirit, he's still not gonna change. I have
to blind him. Too.
I have to blind him.
The physical component of like this is part of the conversion is we're gonna physically stop you from seeing things because you've been seeing them wrongly, and we're about to reorient your vision to like God's kingdom and what it's about. So, but I also here's the thing I love too about the story. It could have just ended there, and then God like after 3 days, kind of made his vision come back. He's like, all right, new direction, new mission. But he has a friend, or he has a person, Ananias, come into the story. So there's this sense of a relational part of our transformation, right? Like other people are involved in this. And I just think it's so interesting that it's a believer. And he says this powerful moment, brother Saul. Right? God tells him to go to Saul, but he says, brother Saul, like somebody who's been killing your friends, you know, like the compassion, the obedience, the willingness. Ananias could have been like, heck no, I'm not going to this guy.
This guy is brutal. Trying to kill me.
Yeah.
It's not just a brother. It's like Ananias is the guy that Saul went to go kill. People like, so now you're being converted basically by somebody whom you sought to destroy. It requires for some the person that they're trying to kill or murder, physically, like literally and metaphorically. He touches does he touch his eyes?
I don't remember that part.
I think so. Or something. Yeah.
That sounds cool though.
There's an encounter that's like, there's so much here that I'm like, I can't even imagine being Saul in that moment where I'm blind. I have no idea. And then now I'm learning that the guy I'm trying to kill is now I'm dependent upon him for my restoration.
Right.
Like what is total reversal? It's incredible.
So that's part of it. That's part of the conversion is like, because if it was just left alone to Saul and just recovering, like I don't feel like it would have landed maybe. But it's like he needed that tangible, the physical, the relational component.
Well, and I think it's interesting. I think we forget that, we don't forget it, but just the context here actually that Saul oversaw the stoning of Stephen. Right. So, and what was Stephen praying as he's dying? Father, forgive them, right? And so all of a sudden you start to realize that actually a lot of the early church was praying the Beatitudes, right? Blessed are those who are persecuted, who pray for their enemies and bless their enemies, right? So the Lord is actually answering the prayer of the early church, even though it doesn't look like it, right? All of a sudden, the early church is scared, we're seeing the glory of God, but we're also seeing the fierceness of the opposition to the gospel moving forward in our city and in our region. And yet they're praying for the lifting of persecution, and yet the answer comes through the person being persecuted, who is persecuting, being encountered by Jesus himself, the Lord confronting, and that whole process of praying for your enemies, blessing your enemies, the Lord stepping in. And that's actually what's so interesting is that a lot of Psalms say that when the Lord goes to war, he stands up in heaven, right? That's it's a recurring motif throughout Psalms. And what did Stephen see? He saw the Lord stand up. And what did he immediately say? Lord, forgive them. He became like Jesus. So the Lord's about to go to war to defend Stephen, right? But just like Moses stepped in as intercessor, I think Stephen stepped in as intercessor and was like, no, forgive them, right? And then all of a sudden, a couple chapters later, Saul gets kicked off his horse. So there's something about that I think the Lord's inviting us into of do we really trust the Lord to confront our enemies if we will love them and then bring them into community, you know?
It's the most difficult teaching. Well, there's probably a lot, but I'm for the dramatic emphasis in this moment. It really is. No, really. You've heard it said, love your neighbor, right? I say to you, right? Jesus is rewriting kind of the language of our law. I say to you, love your enemies. And pray for those who persecute you, like you're saying, you know? So it's not enough to just love people like you or love people even in proximity to you. Love people that are opposed to you.
Right.
And I think this is the hardest thing to really practice. Super nice to be like, oh, I love your enemies. Do we? And what does that mean? Because I also feel like, how can you love somebody even from afar? Right? Sure. It's a coming near to, a touching and saying, brother, sister.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally.
Let me enter into that relationship. Because how can you love somebody and not be in relationship?
Yeah.
But it's pretty hard to do when you feel like somebody's really after you.
Right,
or talking about you or wants your downfall. I mean, all these things. It's like there are things in this world, right, wanting to keep us apart, especially as the church. I feel like not even thinking in terms of externally, internally, the church, there are forces that would love, that are loving the division and the bickering and the fighting and the finger pointing and it's your fault and how come you, and it's like, what does it mean to love your enemy inside?
Right.
You know?
Well, and I think it's interesting because I think this is like, we need to make sure that we like preface this of like, we don't let people abuse us. That's not what's happening. Right. But there are so many boundaries that are actually still happening in this text.
Definitely.
Like both Saul and Ananias have to have a clear word of the Lord for this like reconciliation to happen. It doesn't mean that they're not praying for him and blessing him, but for there to be actual restoration in person, like both of them had to get encountered.
Yeah, Ananias is not going to Saul if it wasn't for this Lord saying to Ananias, you need to go to Saul. And even then he's like, wait, what? He's like, no, listen, I'm going to use Saul for this purpose.
Exactly.
You are going to now be that instrument that I need. I don't know that I would want to be Ananias in this situation because you're like, wait, hold on. I'm going to who? You're sending me where? And I have to do what? Like, what are you talking about? I don't know that I want to participate in that. And yet Ananias, he could, like you said, he could be praying for his enemies. But then when you're actually called to engage whom you think as your enemy, and both saw each other as their enemy, so then what does that look like to then, it takes one person to have their sight, both of their sights are changed in this moment. They're both converted.
Absolutely,
It's not just a Saul conversion, it's an Ananias conversion.
It is,
And he's seeing something that's like, whoa, I didn't realize that God was going to do even something like this. Wow, that's incredible. They both have a total transformative moment in this relationship.
And I was thinking about this story. This happened years ago, but I had this person who was just so mean to me. It was like kind of unmerited, and I didn't understand. It was just constantly like when I was around them being criticized or whatever. And I remember one day I got a phone call and I had been given this major project that was just super cool. I was going to be working with some really influential people in LA and just doing this thing. And it was like, I was like, oh, sweet, And I hang up the phone and I heard the Lord just gently, and he just goes, hey, so-and-so also loves that stuff. Like, what if you gave this project to them? And I was like, what? Like, I was like, and I like literally stopped. I was like, you know how mean they are to me. Like you've seen like in the passing of going of just things they say about me behind my back and to my face even sometimes. And the Lord's like, but what if I've called them to that and you're not the person? And I just had a moment and I was like, okay, Lord. And so I like picked up the person, picked up the phone and called back the person who had put me on the project. And I said, hey, I'm so honored that you would choose me to oversee this. But actually, have you considered? And I like mentioned this other person, just kind of talked them up and it was like, this is their skill set. This is what they're good at. This is what they're passionate about. And they're on the phone. They were kind of weirded out. They're like, why would you pass this project? But I was like, I feel like they're going to be amazing at this. And sure enough, they were. They were incredible. They did such a fantastic job. And that I watched as that role opened up several roles for that person, and they stepped into something for the kingdom that was just so beautiful and so powerful and so aligned with what God was doing in their life at that season. It wasn't really necessarily what I was doing, like what God was doing with me, And and I remember still being like, they're so mean to me. Like, they have no idea. Like, and to this day, they actually have no idea that I gave them that project. They have like no idea. But it was interesting because a few years later, I hadn't talked to them for a long time. I ran into them somewhere. And they just like apologized. They were like, I am so sorry. I had treated you so poorly. And I kind of was shocked. I was like, I don't know, But then like just realizing like they weren't a bad person. I think we get triggered by people and we, whatnot. I'm not here to like talk about that part of it, but realizing like this person was on a continuum with Jesus and God saw who they were becoming. And I had like, and it's like, he was just like, would you be like me in this situation? Would you pass a promotion or pass like a thing that could open a door for you for my kingdom, not for them, but for me advancing? And I think that's what we have, like, I don't know, I think we could challenge. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys feel
I love it. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, well, two things. One, your discernment. Like you knew that was the voice of God, right? That was the Lord's nudging you, so you've walked with God a long time. So to me, it feels like you can trust that,
right?
Totally. You can be like, oh, this is you. Like, I know your voice, right? Yeah. Like my sheep know my voice, that kind of idea of like, this is you, this isn't me, this isn't something else, this is God. And then the sense of you had a choice to make. Right. Do I do this? Or do I not?
Yeah, totally.
I can hear you and ignore you. Because I think we have that. That happens a lot too. God's like, do this. You're like, no, I'm good. We don't. But you had obedience to do what God asked you to do. Because I think it ties down to everything. I think it ties down to trust.
Yeah,
like you trusted. Like God God's will be done in my life, right? It's not about elevating yourself, which I love about you. You're not about like trying to make yourself this big thing or name or whatever. You're like, I want the best for your kingdom, God.
Totally.
And I think that's really should be the motive of all of our hearts,
right?
You know, like it's about you and what you want for my life and for somebody else's life. And am I willing to surrender? But what a beautiful thing, though, to be like, especially when it was somebody who was not kind to you.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be different if it was like just somebody even neutral in your life that you were giving this opportunity to. But to say like, how are our attitudes towards people who we just feel like don't like us or just aren't happy for us or something? To do something like that just shows incredible maturity, I think. And that's a challenge for me. That's a challenge for us listening. Like, am I willing to, one, discern the voice of God and to really follow through? And that it's not about me, it's about God's kingdom. And what would I do if I was confronted with this very thing is something to wrestle with.
And when you're thinking about discerning the voice of God, I don't think it's your voice when in the background, you're like not thinking I should probably bless the person that's like persecuting me, you know, or to use another language, like that's Paul would say, you know, it says about Saul, he's breathing murderous threats. Like, I want to bless someone who's breathing murderous threats against me. No, that's not usually coming from me, you know? So when you're like, hey, I think you should bless this person, you're like, wait,
that's definitely God.
It didn't come from me because I wouldn't have thought that, right? And so now I have an opportunity to say, okay, well, I heard that. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, I loved how Pastor Drew says, like the lie of the adversary is like, did God really say that? You know, like we're starting to like, well, I heard that. Maybe I'm just hungry. You know, maybe I'm just thirsty. Maybe I just need to take a nap and maybe I'll hear something different. You know, it's like, no, that actually came from the Lord. Like, you should bless this person whom you don't want to, right? Obviously, you're doing it within some boundaries. We want to talk about that, but I think that's really a beautiful thing to say, like, okay, God, I'm saying yes to something that I know isn't in my natural state. I probably wouldn't think this way. But what would it look like for me to say yes to what you're offering and to see how that might bless them? You know, we can do that all the time. It could even simply be, man, you want me to pray for this person?
Right.
Like, I wouldn't naturally think I should pray for this person, but like I could stop my day and pray a blessing over this person. You know, I think
that's a really good practice, actually. Yes. I think that's such a good practice. It's so subtle. I think of like the screw tape letters, you know, and how like the head demon was like writing to the nephew, and it was like, if you can get Christians to think they're doing my will, that's actually the best thing, you know. Like, if you can get them to think they're but they're really not working for God. I'm sorry, let me take that. So if you can get Christians to think they're working for God, but they're not, that's the best thing, right? Like, they're deceived. So I think sometimes when we enemy, when we do this, like there's that sense of self-righteousness of like, I'm in the right, and like they're obviously, this is an attack of the end, you know. It's like, God, you love all people. You love all people equally. Help me to love people like you do. Hence Jesus's words, love your enemies. Let me love them, and praying for them, even if it feels involuntary. I do believe this. It's like, no, the prayer needs to precede my will, like even my want, my desire. Like, I'm going to pray this. I don't want to. My flesh wants to be like, you know what? Would you convict them? Convict their, you know, like we want to be like,
absolutely. Right. Totally.
But it's like to pray like, God bless them. Give them peace today. Heal the things that are wounded in their life. Would they feel a sense of your presence and your compassion? Wow. Try that today, and think about how freeing that is too. To be like, I'm leaving my stuff with this person at your feet, and I'm just going to pray that you were with them. You know?
And it's so interesting because I think that's what Ananias models so beautifully, right? And what I find is so fascinating is the Lord tells Ananias, I'm going to use Paul to the Roman Empire. Like, he goes, hey, this is a heavy hitter. Like, don't judge him right now. And that Drew really went into that in the sermon about like God using like the least that we would think is like the worst possible choice to go somewhere for his gospel. And yet God is like, no, Saul's the one I want. Like, he's a little too zealous right now in the wrong direction. But if I get him in the right direction, he's actually going to be so influential. And I think like Ananias, and even Drew said this, Ananias disappears from the text, and he's probably a faithful, loving Jesus, does his life, you know. But he really had this pivotal moment where he actually put his own ego down, his own pain, his own frustration, his own fear, became courageous, stepped in to bless his enemy, and then actually really reinstate him into the community of God, right? And then we see Paul becomes one of the biggest. I mean, we're still reading the books of Paul. Paul wrote most of the Old Testament, New Testament, and had Ananias not stopped for the one, had he not let go of his ego or his fear, we wouldn't have more than half of the New Testament.
That's wild.
So it's just stuff like that where I feel like, as much as it's so hard to go look at somebody, especially like when we have this like adversary experience with somebody where like we don't feel peace, there's not like a friend jovial experience with them, like to go, God, who are they going to be in 5, 10, 20 years? And what are you actually calling me to do to love them now, to release grace? And I've had people love me when I was a hot mess. I have one friend in particular who I was just going through so much in my early 20s, and she just loved me. So she saw me. She knew what God was doing in my life. She had boundaries, but she was just like, I'm going to fiercely love Erica right now. And she just showed up to love me. And it's like, I've never forgotten that friend. And I've been like, gosh, I needed someone to love me at my worst, to know that just grace, you know what I mean? So that I could love other people in the future,
So important.
So
as you look at this text, we talk about how to read scripture. We talk about like when we project our, time and place onto
the fancy word for that, I believe, is eisegesis.
Okay, well,
Eisegesis.
Throw a little seminary word out there.
Versus exegesis. We
not exegeting.
All right, now we lost everybody.
No, you didn't.
But anyway, we read our story onto the text before we actually learn what the text is all about. So that's really important. And I think we tend to read ourselves into the hero of the story. And so we all want to be the Ananias in this story. Oh my goodness, isn't it great that we get to be the one that participates with the conversion of somebody else? We get to put our hands and open the eyes of the blind. Isn't that amazing? And yes, it is. And there are times where we will be the Ananias in the story.
Sure.
And we are also all the Sauls. We think we're all going in the right direction. We think and zealous is not a bad thing. Like being zealous for the Lord is a beautiful thing. It's just when you're always zealous and you can never be wrong, or you're always right. And Saul's like, I am on the straight path. I'm on the straight street. And I am zealous for the Lord, and I am going to destroy everyone else who is not in line. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You have to hit your face to the sand or to the dirt and go, whoa, you're blinded. Now you're restored. All of us have those stories where we will be like Saul. Yeah. It's just not, I know it's a one-time conversion experience. We talk a lot about, going from lack of faith and trust in Jesus into a faith and trust in Jesus. I think there's a lot more happening here for Saul than just simply faith and trust in Jesus Christ. And yet, so I wonder do we have multiple conversion experiences in our life where we're like, we think we're so zealous for the Lord, and then we're like, oh, wow, thank you, God, for opening my eyes to that. I'm course correcting. Doesn't mean I'm not as passionate. I'm just course correcting, and you continually course correct me towards your heart and who you are, Jesus. And I invite that.
It's humility. Like it's so core. It's core to the early church. It's what we see it goes to our whole like the high will be brought low, right? Just this, the first will be last will be first idea. And like Jesus modeling, his last hours of washing his disciples' feet, he could have done anything that night. He's on his knees washing the feet of his disciples, modeling humility, right? Like willingness to get his hands dirty. Because he loves people. But just as followers of Jesus, like the very first thing is like, I could be wrong, God.
Right.
And I love there's this Thomas Merton quote that's like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm following you, but I could be wrong, basically. But I desire to please you. And I do believe that the desire to please you does, in fact, please you, right? So guide me. But just that, like, the surrendering. And I think it's funny how the pendulum always seems to swing back to the zealousness, the rigidness, the, like, I know, and the defending God idea. Like, I'm defending. Do you think God needs defending? The God of the universe needs you to defend him?
Right.
Like, God's good. Like, God's like, I'm good, actually. Can you love people well? Like, and you honor me when you love people? Like, that's how you show that you love me, is by caring for people around you and showing that humility. I'm God, you're not. I'm good. Just go where I send you. Be obedient. Have the humility. Do what Jesus did. That's your job, church. To the continuation of the ministry of Jesus. That is what we're supposed to do. And if I'm doing things that really don't look like Jesus, I should probably check myself. Like I should.
And I love that too, kind of off both your points. Like, you can be on the straight way and blind.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting that he's on this, the metaphor of that he's on the straight path and still blind, but the Lord, he confronts because he's truth, and I love it because truth is a person. It's not ideology. It's actually a living, breathing person, and so when you're like, look, when people are like, it's black and white thinking, it's this or that. I'm like, no, it's a person. Like he's got emotions, he's got feelings, and he said he was the way, the truth, the life. Like, and so you're not operating with intellectuality. You're actually like you're operating when we're seeking truth, we are dealing with a human. God human, what I mean? We're dealing with Jesus himself. So it's like Saul gets confronted by the man truth, not his intellect, not what he had studied his whole life. He gets like the Torah standing in front of him, and in that, I love that because I just feel like that is what God has called us to like that humility to like go, wait a minute, this isn't about, our minds are so finite compared to the living, breathing word of God, and being able to come before him and be like, I don't know. Would you show me like even Peter, I love it, as he's getting discipled with the Lord at one point, he's just like, you alone hold the words of life, and just like, God, I hang on every word that comes out of your mouth because I don't understand what you just said, and that kind of thing. And I think that is this like the seeking path. But I do think that God chose Saul because I think he loves passion. I think there was something there, and I think the Lord loves it. And so I think he does love to confront the ones that are and that's why I think we have to have eyes for people who are really intense, because sometimes they're actually like if you get them on the right path, like they're going to be like so influential and so monumental to like our faith communities if we can give grace with boundaries and stuff like that. But you know what I mean? I don't know, to value those ones.
I thank the Lord that it was the Lord that got him on the right path. Right. It wasn't Ananias.
It wasn't Ananias.
Ananias didn't go up to him and say, Saul, I need to give you the direction. No, that happens all the way through, whether it's Peter, whether it's Saul, whether it's Philip. It was the Lord that continues to guide people towards the right path. And then we get to participate in bringing about with God that kind of healing. And so I wonder for us, as we think about this passage and kind of, yes, we love talking about the text and getting into it, but like, what does this look like for us on a regular daily basis? I think we need to hold both together and not make it either or, and not try to make us one or the other, but that we can look at ourselves and say, okay, I am Saul and I am Ananias, and I am both people at maybe even at the same time sometimes. And so what do I have to look at within myself of saying, God, I want you to bring me back into alignment with you and where you're going. Jesus, I want to be following after you. I don't want to be going in a direction that's antagonistic to who you are, right? So bring me back towards you. That's a Saul kind of prayer. And then there's an Ananias kind of prayer of like, God, I want you to bless those that seek to persecute me. Yeah. I don't like even having to pray that prayer right now. So
I'm going to give a little practical exercise of the prayer of examine. It's one of my favorite things to do every night. And we can make it really special for this week if you want. But the idea at the end of your day is to reflect on your day, like play it out like a movie. Just kind of go, oh yeah, like when I woke up. And the first thing is gratitude. Thank you, God, for waking me up for another day of life, for the breath in my lungs, for the beauty of the day. Like, thank you. And then the next one is, where did I see you? Where was there consolation? Where did I move towards you? Where did I choose you? So where did I choose your love, your compassion, your forgiveness, your grace, right? Your gentleness. Like, where did I exhibit the fruit of the Spirit? So just that moment that was so special with that person who just really needed a word of grace and encouragement, and thank you for using me. And then the third one is, where did I miss the mark? Where was there desolation? Yeah. Where did I move away from choosing you? Where did I choose to judge somebody else? Where did I harbor some hardness of heart towards that one person? Oh God. And then the final prayer is, help me to choose you tomorrow. Help me to choose you tomorrow. And I think it's those small reflections, the prayer, the daily practice, not the once a year, not the once a quarter, you know, which we're really, it's like the daily, right? What happened? Like I've heard somebody say like, it really matters more what you do every day than every once in a while, right? Like hitting the gym, eating well, things like that.
Totally.
So this practice of reflection, where did I choose you? Where did I not choose you? Help me to choose you tomorrow. And then we can add a little bonus. Help me to pray for somebody who I might deem an enemy right now.
Yeah.
And pray for their blessing,
a good one
their
right
well-being.
there. Yeah.
I mean, that's enough work, you know?
Totally.
That's hard. But like, what if we did that? Can you imagine? Sorry, I'm on this. If we did like a prayer of examine, just that, as a community for a year, just really cultivated this practice of reflection in the small ways of our lives, I think we would see so much change in who we are as a community.
Totally.
Change that looks like a people who are loving and following Jesus faithfully.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
We're going to close it out with that practice.
Yes.
Oh, wow. This is a lot. We hope you enjoyed this time, this discussion. Hopefully you went a little deeper. Maybe you were encouraged, challenged, inspired in some way. But we're going to continue the conversation next week. Thank you for joining us for Sermon Sessions. Catch you next time. I winked at the camera. That's cool.
Never wink.